I obtained custody of my sister's 3 kids back in 2018 after she left them alone for 2 weeks to go on a drug bender. It was a huge transition for the kiddos because not only did they have to switch schools and daycares, but they also wouldn't be able to see their mother anymore. I've adopted the kids and have full custody of them. They're doing better now and leading happier lives. Recently though, my sister was released from prison and wants to see them. She called me begging to have a visit with them and telling me that I could give them back now because she was out of prison. I've had a talk with the 9-year-old and he says he doesn't want to see his mom yet. He told me that he still hates her for leaving him alone. The girls have no memories of her. The smallest was only 3 months old the last time she saw her. I feel like I could have helped them foster a better relationship with their mom, but I don't want to force them to meet her if they don't want to. My close family has told me that the oldest doesn't know what he's talking about and it's my fault the little ones don't remember their mother because I didn't take them to see her when she was in prison. They also told me that it's my responsibility to force them to meet her even when they don't want to because it's what's best for them and they shouldn't grow up without their mother. I've spoken to a professional about this and they said it should be up to the kids. Am I being a jerk to my sister by not letting her kids see her if they don't want to? I gave my oldest 2 weeks to really think about whether he wanted to see my sister or not. I figured that his original decision might have been made out of anger, so I wanted to give him time to make such an important decision. Ultimately, he decided that he did actually want to talk to her. I was a bit surprised, but we set up a Zoom call between them with me supervising. Right before the call, he admitted to me that he wanted to talk to her just to see if she'd say sorry. She didn't. Instead, she opened the call with, "Hello, it's been so long. I guess you're ready to come home with me now?" That's when she noticed I was sitting there with him. She immediately launched into accusations of alienation, followed by saying if I don't give the kids back, then she'd call the police and say I kidnapped them. My oldest was disgusted and asked her if she was going to apologize to him. She had the audacity to ask what for. At that point, he shut off the Zoom call. I asked him if he was okay, but he spent the rest of the afternoon in his room by himself. That night, he told me that he never wanted to talk to her again. I told him he didn't have to talk to her again if he didn't want to, and we'd never give him back over to her. Before now, I honestly never considered myself as their parent, even after legally adopting them. Now I realize those kids are my kids and they're going to be for the rest of my life. This is why you might not want to use Facebook to find a roommate. My sister and I work in the medical field and we're renting a house together. The rent was pretty high and we quickly decided that it would be helpful if we got a roommate. However, after weeks of looking, we still couldn't find anyone. My sister and I were desperate and posted in the Facebook groups about needing a roommate. This woman in her late 30s named Tammy answered and we were excited that we had found our new roommate. When we met her and talked to her, everything seemed normal. She seemed nice and put together. My sister's in residency and I'm in nursing school, so we made it clear that we needed a respectful roommate who understood our schedules. When she first moved in, everything seemed to be going well. After the first week, I had a friend come over to hang out. While my friend was there, Tammy came into my room and introduced herself. I could smell the alcohol on her breath as she spoke and she started hitting on my friend. She kept telling her how she was down for hot girl bye shit. She was doing this all while aggressively petting my labradoodle. Luckily, my friend just laughed it off and we assumed that she was drunk. Then Tammy went to her room and after about 10 minutes, we started hearing moaning coming from her room. She didn't have any guests over and we tried to ignore it at first, but the moaning escalated to screaming. We could hear things being thrown around in the room as well. After 20 minutes of this, we got worried and went to get my sister. My sister talked to Tammy and she apologized, saying she was just sleeping. About 2 weeks later, my sister stayed at her boyfriend's house and I was stuck with Tammy. I made myself dinner and I was eating, and that's when Tammy came downstairs. She was blasted drunk again and went to the stove. She started reheating my food, and that's when I asked her if she wanted some, but she said she was just stirring my food for me. After I ate my dinner, I went to look and she had taken all of it. Over time, I noticed she would eat our food without permission, even when I asked her not to. When I'd call her out on it, she would lie and say she didn't touch my food. We used to keep our liquor in the kitchen, but she started drinking from the bottles and we had to move them to our rooms. She would go into my room because I had a bottle of liquor and she drank it, then fill it up with water. However, it was easy to tell because it was whiskey. One night I was studying for one of my exams and I hear loud screaming. I assumed it was coming from her room, but when I opened my door, I realized it was coming from outside. I went downstairs and saw her laying on the floor of the backyard, screaming her head off. I told her that she was being loud and the neighbors would call the cops. She got up and apologized and then went to her room. However, she repeated this again a couple days later. Just when I thought it couldn't get any worse, it did. A week after she started screaming in the backyard, my sister and I decided that we needed to get her out. We had a house meeting and told Tammy that she has a month to move out. At first, she was crying and upset, acting like she didn't know what she did wrong, but then she accepted it. However, the last month with her was the worst month of my life. I was concluding the semester at nursing school and it was about to be finals. She started eating me and my sister's packed lunches out of our lunch boxes. She also started breaking dishes on purpose, leaving the glass where our corgi and labradoodle would play. When I confronted her about it, she blew it off saying that it was an accident and hadn't gone around to cleaning it. One night, she sat me and my sister down threatening to sue us because we were trying to get rid of her during COVID. My sister wasn't having it and told her to get her lawyer. I installed 7 cameras in the house because I couldn't trust her while we weren't there and I was worried for our dogs. She would put her cigarette butts and ashes in our dog's food bowl, so I knew I needed to watch her. Whenever I checked the cameras, she was always up to something like eating our food, looking through our things, and going into our bedrooms when we weren't around. The craziest part of all of this is when she finally moved out and we saw her room. It was a complete mess. There was menstrual blood all over the carpet, scratches on the wall, and she left a painting that she had done of our house burning while she walked away. Story time about how I found out my husband was cheating on me with his stepsister and her best friend. My husband and I had been married for 5 years. We were living in another state when he was fired from work and my job wasn't paying well enough. We decided to move in with his family until we could figure things out and get back on our feet. He had a stepsister and she was drop dead gorgeous. Since he didn't have a job, he would spend most of his time at home while I dropped off our son at daycare and then went to work. When I would get home, he'd go to the bar. At first, I thought things were normal and he was just stressed out about not being able to find work. However, I started getting suspicious once he started being a little aggressive towards me. He stopped wanting to talk to me as often and barely sat next to me anymore. His parents planned a trip to Europe and asked us to take care of the house while they were gone, to which we agreed. I noticed whenever I wasn't home, he would be home alone with his stepsister, and whenever I got back, they would both leave. I also noticed he wasn't trying very hard to find a job, leaving all the responsibilities to me. One day I was calling him while I was at work and he wasn't picking up. I had a bad feeling and asked my boss if I could leave early. Thankfully, my boss was nice and let me go. When I got home, I heard 2 girls giggling and the sound of a guy huffing coming from our room upstairs. What I saw next left me devastated. When I came home and heard the sounds coming from our room upstairs, my blood was rushing through my body. I quietly went up the stairs and found my husband screwing his stepsister and her best friend at the same time. I was so devastated and heartbroken. I didn't know what to do, so I quickly rushed out of the house and went back to work. When I didn't return home that night, my husband called me asking why I was late and started accusing me of cheating. That's when I realized that none of them had seen me earlier and decided to get back at him. Earlier that day when I returned to work, my boss asked me if I was okay because he noticed my eyes were red from crying. I broke down, and you know how the saying goes, a shoulder to cry on becomes a deed to write on. When I told him what I saw, he told me to file for divorce and make him pay for the nasty deed. He also told me that he'd be by my side and would take care of everything, including a place for me and my son to stay. I went home that night like nothing was wrong and acted like things were okay. The next day came and I went home early again to catch him in the act. This time I recorded footage of him cheating for evidence. In the end, I got a divorce, money, and full custody of my son. Now I'm married to my boss, living in a big house with someone who deeply loves and respects me. Story time about the weirdest things to happen while working as a stripper. I was giving a $25 dance in a busy room filled with other dancers. It was the room for the cheap customers, so there weren't any dividers. Just a big room filled with armchairs and people watching each other get private dances. At this specific club, dancers were required to remove our shoes during private dances so we wouldn't damage the armchairs. We usually put our shoes and whatever else under the chair so that nobody would mess with them while we were busy. After the private dances, my guy and the guy next to me are the only ones to buy a second dance. The rest of the girls clear out and it's just me and another girl. When I look over, the other guy is sniffing the sole of the girl's shoe behind her back while she's grinding on him. We make eye contact and he drops her shoe. I don't want to ruin my own private dance by saying something, so I ignored it and just continued to do my thing. They were only 3 feet away, so it was hard not to notice things. I look over again and he's doing it again. He noticed me looking and dropped the shoe, looking away. Finally, a third time I look over and this dude is giving the heel of her stripper shoe a freaking BJ, all while making eye contact with me. This time he holds eye contact and intensely stares at me. That's when I got creeped out and avoided him the rest of the night. I also never told the girl that her shoe had been defiled. One night there was an older gentleman around 55 years old buying lots of double dances. He was tipping generously and even buying everyone in the bar a round of drinks at some point. It was around 1 in the morning when this large curly red-haired lady smashes down onto the push and door lever as hard as humanly possible. Every patron in the club turned and looked at the door. She stood there in all her glory with a red fried perm, mom jeans, and thick framed glasses. I could instantly tell that she was seething with anger. She was on a mission and stormed towards the back of the club where the VIP rooms were, all while shouting, "Derek! Derek, where the F are you?" The bouncer immediately notices and runs towards the back, trying to stop her from causing any problems. However, it was too late. She swings the VIP room door open and sees him in there with 2 girls getting a double dance. She immediately grabs him by the arm and starts yanking him towards the door, all while smacking him repeatedly. She pulls him out into the parking lot and then into her car. That was the last we ever saw of generous old Derek. Story time about how my carefree friend got rich by listening to the universe. I have a friend named Paige who's a free spirit. She believes in going with the flow, not stressing and letting the universe decide what happens next. I've always been more of a planner and kind of a workaholic. Paige always said that I work too hard and need to relax. She'd say I stress about things too much and the universe already has a plan for me, so I should let it run its course, but I never listened. I've had 2 jobs and I've been in school full-time for as long as I can remember. I always believe that if you want something, you have to work hard for it and make it happen. I never believed in just sitting back and waiting for things to happen for me or leaving it up to the universe, as she'd often preach. However, maybe I should have slowed down and taken her advice. Over a few years, Paige and I drifted apart. She messaged me one day telling me that she was coming back to town and she'd like to visit me while she's here. I was absolutely shocked when she pulled up in a brand new Tesla. Paige never really cared about money and didn't really work besides selling her natural healing oils, which paid okay but nothing crazy. I hopped in and noticed she also had an expensive designer bag, eco-friendly of course, and expensive jewelry on. When I asked her where she got all this from, she told me that the universe got it for her, which is something that I'd expect her to say, but it didn't make any sense. What she was about to tell me changed my outlook on things and made me think that Paige's ideas and beliefs weren't so far-fetched after all. Paige told me how she always knew things would work out and the universe would take care of her if she did her part. She told me she got all of this money by being nice to the earth and catering to Mother Nature, which still made absolutely no sense to me. It sounded good, but I knew that the money didn't just fall into her lap from the sky for being nice to the planet and believing that the universe would take care of her. Upon further questioning, she finally explained that the universe told her to invest half of her money into something she believed in and donate the other half. She said she had been putting half of her money into solar power and eco-friendly stocks and donating the other half to environmental activists over the years. Paige believed that since she was doing her part to care for the planet was caring for her back. Well, it turns out that the stocks that she invested in for years blew up. She made enough money to live comfortably for the rest of her life. To be honest, I was in complete shock. I always thought her carefree attitude and laid-back lifestyle wouldn't get her too far, but I turned out to be completely wrong. She ended up doing way better than me, all while working and stressing a lot less. Since then, I've taken a page from Paige's book. I worry a lot less about the little things and try to enjoy my life with her same stress-free attitude. Maybe with this way of thinking, the universe will look out for me next. Or maybe she just got lucky.
Imagine resorting to murdering your spouse after only 8 days of marriage. Today, we're going to be talking about the murder of Cody Johnson. To give a little bit of backstory into his life, he was born on April 8th, 1998, was very outdoorsy, loved cars, got a career in making custom commercial cars, and his boss was his best friend. He had an awesome relationship with his family, with his friends, an amazing job that he loved, but all he really wanted was a wife to go along with it. Well, in Halloween of 2011, he met Jordan Graham. She was a huge Christian, very active in the church, but she was also very shy and reserved. But this attracted Cody to her. They were like yin and yang, perfect opposites. And Cody knew he was going to marry her after just a few weeks of knowing Jordan. He fell so hard, but a lot of their friends and family was noticing that Jordan wasn't falling quite as hard. And it's very important that I state that because of Jordan's religious views, celibacy was huge for her. So Jordan and Cody decided to buy a house and get married. It was very noticeable that Jordan was more excited about the wedding, though, than the marriage. And when it was time for the wedding, this is when things took a turn for the worse. Well, the day of the wedding hit, and they had a custom song made for their wedding. And it stated things like, "You're my safe place to fall," "You help me to climb higher for a better view," and this is all a massive foreshadow. After their wedding, Cody took a week off of work as their honeymoon period to move into their new house. Well, the day before this honeymoon period was over was a Sunday, so they went to church, went to the lake, and went out to Dairy Queen with some friends. And this was the last time anyone heard from Cody. The next day occurred, and he didn't show up to work. His boss, who again was also his best friend, was extremely worried. So worried that he went to his house, and when he knocked on the door for a while and no one answered, he resorted to breaking in. He was panicked, looked for evidence around the house, and found Cody's phone in the garage. But there was no sign of Jordan. Absolutely panicked, he called the police. Because of how worried his boss was, the police took this very seriously. They were also wondering why his wife didn't make this report. Well, the wife ended up texting a friend asking if they had seen Cody, saying that he drove off with out-of-town friends and didn't know where he went. So at this point, friends and family know that Cody is missing. So they go to Cody and Jordan's house to help. And when they're over there, Jordan just seems upset instead of happy that people are actually helping. At one point, she gets so upset that she throws her wedding ring. Well, obviously with this behavior, the police call her in to question her. They're like, "Hey, was there a fight?" She says no. They're like, "Well, do you think you know where he went?" She's like, "Well, he does like to go out on very fast joyrides," almost suggesting that they were going too fast and maybe crashed somewhere. She also said that she didn't make a missing persons report in case he came back and was upset with her. Well, the cops were potentially thinking that this was a drug deal gone wrong, because that wasn't uncommon for the area. Search parties were looking for Cody everywhere until an email came in. I'll insert this email now from Cody the car man. And Jordan originally showed this email to her friend, and it was her friend who encouraged her to take this email to the cops instead of her just doing it herself. It stated that his body was in Glacier National Park, but when she took this to the police, she showed no emotion, but they still decided to search there. So whenever Jordan brought this email to them, she claimed that he did work with a Cody, and when they found this Cody and interviewed him, he said that he hadn't worked with him in a long time. He also was extremely cooperative, and they couldn't find any evidence against him. They also could not tie that email to him. So they take their search to Glacier National Park. Jordan brings her friend Hannah and they walk around with a search party looking at different areas. But again, Jordan's very unemotional and not even helping. Her friend was just trying to be as supportive as possible. Well, they couldn't find him, so they went home, called it a day, and came back the next day. And Jordan brought her little brother with her. And as they're driving through, Hannah is suggesting places that the search party should go to. But Jordan ends up having another idea. She takes them on a very long road to the top where a parking lot is, and states that her and Cody went here a lot. This area was beautiful and scenic, but dangerous, and the rocks for the hikers were not approved. But everyone watched as Jordan jumped over the railing and onto the rocks, went to a specific edge of a small cliff, throws a rock over the edge and states, "I think he's down there." So Jordan throws the rock over the edge and states, "OMG, it's him." Her little brother joins her and kind of looks over the edge, and it's just past the point that you can't see, but you can definitely see that something's down there, which traumatized her little brother, and he was so upset that he was physically crawling back to the car and crying. And again, Jordan was emotionless. And everyone was shocked by her behavior and the fact that she knew the right place to go. A member of the FBI had to actually climb down the tree by rope in order to confirm that there was a body down there before they even started the rescue mission, because of how dangerous the rescue mission would be. But once they were able to go there, they confirmed that it was him, he had his ID on him, and a helicopter had to come drop a 200-foot line to retrieve him. All of Cody's friends and family stated that he was afraid of heights, so he had to have been lured there. The police thought it was very suspicious that Jordan knew exactly where to go, and when questioned on this, she said the Holy Spirit just led her to this spot. Now they're super weirded out but still don't have evidence against her. And this is when her matron of honor ended up coming forward with text messages about Jordan being scared to get married. So the matron of honor ended up coming forward with all of these text messages, in which Jordan was saying that she was scared to get married and scared to lose her virginity. She was also crying the day of her wedding and stated that she would freak out if he even made a move on her. Well, I guess after they got married, she pretended like she was on her period. But obviously that lie can only last for so long, so she told her friend that she ended up telling Cody she didn't want to be with him anymore after 8 days of marriage, that they got into an argument and he left. So now the police know that she's telling different people different things. On top of that, they were able to trace the IP address of the email back to her stepdad's house. So that's when Jordan knew it was time to come clean. She said she told Cody she wasn't happy anymore and they got into a huge argument, but decided to cool off a little bit at the national park, in which they got into an altercation again and she pushed him off the cliff, which didn't surprise investigators at this point. Jordan then went to his funeral and was on her phone the entire time, and finally was arrested for first and second degree murder, but was only convicted for second degree and sentenced to 30 years. In which she didn't testify or apologize. Because of her Christian background, she made it seem like it was worse to just divorce. The weirdest thing that ever happened to my family is my sister finding out she was dating our long-lost brother. You're probably asking, how did this happen? So when my sister was about 1, my mom was pregnant with another baby. She ended up birthing my brother, but me being 1 year old really didn't understand. Like, you really can't comprehend that you have a brother at that age. And fairly soon after this, my parents ended up getting a divorce. So my dad was originally from Germany and he decided to move back. Well, because you can't really do weekend visitations in Germany, my parents made the executive decision to split up the kids. My mom kept us and my dad got my brother. And we honestly didn't care. We didn't really know what was going on at that age. And after that, we didn't have any more contact. So fast forward 20 years later, my mom and my sister aren't really talking because of a whole separate situation. And she was going to our town's community college and met a boy. We can call him John. Well, John asked her out on a date and they ended up dating for 5 more years. Over the years, she learned stuff like his dad was from Germany, his dad passed away, and he didn't really have any contact with his mom. So over the course of dating John for about 5 years, she picked up a lot of information about his life. Essentially, he said that he came back to his birth home to go to community college here after his dad passed away. In Germany. His dad never said anything about his mom, so he never knew name or any info. While this seemed kind of similar to our brother's story, she just wasn't thinking about it. It happened when she was so young that it just didn't really cross her mind. And my mom and her were not on speaking terms, so it's not like my mom could just recognize him. Anyways, since they were dating for so long, he ended up proposing to her. She was so excited and ended up bringing him over to our grandma's to spread the news. When they walked in, my grandma made the weirdest face. She asked what his name was and then broke down into tears when he said John. She was like, "Oh my God, that is your long-lost brother." And the only reason she knew it is because my dad had contact with her before he passed away. They were obviously very disgusted because they were engaged and had done the nasty. We now have family reunions now that my mom and her are on better terms, but it's still weird. You guys are not even gonna believe it when I say that when I was 15, I almost became a stepmom. Yes, we did skip a few chapters, so let's start from the beginning of the book. Back in the day, in middle school, there was this new bad boy in town. And for the purpose of the story, his name will be Dean. So Dean was a little bit older, but he would date some of the middle school girls. A little sus, I know, but even beyond this man had a bad reputation. And I did my best to stay away from guys like him. That was until the second quarter of my sophomore year in high school happened. And while my mom and I were walking around Walmart looking for a pair of jeans, we ran into Dean's mom. Well, our mom started talking and bonded really well. And that's when his mom suggested that we would be a really cute couple. She talked about how much he's changed, so I went ahead and added him on Snap. And the insane thing is that we actually started having really good conversation. Like deep existential ones. But one night I was bored and started to creep on his Instagram account. And I came across a gender reveal photo. This man had a whole son on the way. And I accidentally liked the photo, and that's when I got a text from Dean saying, "Go ahead, ask me." So when he asked me about liking the gender reveal photo, I just decided to go ahead and play it dumb and be like, "What?" And then he tried to act like that text was meant for someone else. And then I go, "Are you sure you didn't want to ask me about your kid?" He was literally so embarrassed and thought that I would think of him differently. But he told me that him and that girl broke up, so I honestly didn't care. I was just like, so I could potentially be his stepmom. And he was like, "Yeah, I would actually love that." So we continue to snap and talk as normal and start to date. I caught feelings for Dean so hard. But one night when we were snapping, I got really excited and opened it up. And it was some girl. It said, "Who the F are you and why are you snapping my man?" I was like, "Me and Dean have been talking." And she was like, "I'm his baby mama and girlfriend." So I literally told her everything that this man had said to me and that he was in love with me. But then I blocked him on everything because I didn't want to break up their family. Ladies, if a baby mama is involved, always do that little extra bit of stalking to make sure they're really not together. Follow my Insta.
I used to work at a consulting company, and a few years ago I went on a work trip with 4 of my colleagues to visit a client in Miami. It was me, this guy David, and then our 2 bosses, Melissa and Rick. David and I were both younger people at the company, and then Melissa and Rick were both senior, and we reported to them. So we would do our work during the day with our clients, and then at night we usually had dinner all together. And at dinner people were typically having a lot of fun, everyone got a little tipsy. So on the second night at dinner I noticed that David, the coworker who's my age, keeps glancing at our boss Melissa really flirtatiously. So I start subtly observing them more, and I notice that Melissa keeps touching David's shoulder and laughing at all of his bad jokes. And Melissa is not only our boss, but she is married with a kid. So it is very shocking to see Melissa flirting with David, who's like 20 years younger than she is. But I also think maybe I'm reading into things, maybe they're not flirting, because they both would definitely be losing their jobs if they were having any sort of affair. But the next day, things escalated. So I keep seeing my boss, Melissa, and my coworker, David, flirting with each other on our work trip in Miami. And Melissa is much older than David, and she's married with kids. After all of our dinners, they stay at the bar, just the 2 of them talking. So I start to think that something is definitely up. And honestly, I don't really even want to know what's going on because I don't want to get in trouble with the company. So the last night, all 4 of us stay after dinner and get a drink at the bar. And David ends up going up to his hotel room early because he gets hammered. And then my other boss, Rick, goes up shortly after because he's tired. So it's just me and Melissa at the bar finishing our drinks. And as we're finishing our drinks, Melissa asks me if she can see my hotel room, which I think is weird, but I'm like, sure. So we go up and it's pretty awkward. She looks around, she's like, "Oh, it looks just like mine," and then she leaves. 3 weeks later, we're all back in the office and I get a call from Melissa's husband. I've only met him briefly once before at a company party, and I can tell over the phone that he's upset, like his voice is shaking a bit. And he tells me that Melissa's been acting very strange and different ever since our trip to Miami. She's been saying things like she's rethinking everything, she's not sure if she's happy anymore, everything has changed, and he wants to know what happened in Miami. And I'm honest with him. I tell him, as far as I can tell him, nothing happened, but Melissa and David did appear to be very close over the trip. So he says thank you and tells me not to tell Melissa that he called me. A week later, I get a text from Melissa asking me if I want to go camping. And I'm like, "Oh, with other colleagues on like a retreat?" And she says, "No, just the 2 of us." And I find this bizarre and uncomfortable, so I come up with an excuse for why I can't go camping. And then she's like, "All right, we'll want to get drinks after work tonight." And Melissa's my direct boss, so of course I'm going to say yes to that. We meet for drinks, she orders water, and I get a glass of wine. And after a little bit of small talk, she announces that she's pregnant and that I'm the first person she's telling. And I'm like, "Oh wow, congrats." And then she says, "But I'm about to leave my husband." And I start to get nervous, like she's going to tell me that she's having an affair with David. And again, I really just don't want to know about any of it. But that's not what she tells me. She instead tells me that she has developed feelings for me over the past couple months. She says that ever since our work trip to Miami, she can't stop thinking about me and she thinks she's in love. I'm like, "What about David?" And she goes, "What about David? I was only using him to get close to you." 5 years ago, my parents bought a farm in rural Tennessee. And the summer after they bought it, they told my brother and I that we had to work on the farm. And I was like, "Oh, but I want a summer internship in New York City." And they were like, "Oh, that's nice, but you're going to be weed whacking in rural Tennessee." So in Tennessee, there are these snakes called copperheads. And I'm from the East Coast, and we don't have copperheads on the East Coast. So these snakes are really bad. And I know they're bad because people talk shit about them. People never want to say bad things about animals. Like even sharks. Like a shark could bite a woman's leg off, and everyone would be like, "Oh, that poor shark thought she was a seal, so it's kind of her fault, you know? It's kind of on her." And we stand with the shark. And actually the shark's name is Teddy. He's been followed by marine biologists since he was just a baby. But people definitely say bad things about these snakes in Tennessee, these copperheads, because they're ruthless. You know, with predatory animals, how people are like, if you don't bother it, it won't bother you. That's apparently not the case with these copperheads. I was talking to my neighbor one day, this guy Rick, he's a big pink man. I mean, he's a white man, but his face is bright pink. He goes, "Oh yeah, be vigilant because these snakes can kill you. If they see you, they will attack." So I had been in Tennessee for like a month. month, and I hadn't seen one of these snakes yet. And this one day it was so hot, and I was wearing khaki shorts that day, and I had the worst ass crack sweat stain I have ever had. Look, if you ever googled swass, sweaty ass, that day my butt would have been the Wikipedia image for it. So I was so hot and I had to go for a swim, so I went to the creek alone. I'm driving there and I just had this bad feeling, like I knew something bad was gonna happen. So I go to the creek to cool off for what my mom would call a dippy do. A dippy do means going for a swim, for those of you who don't know. It's the middle of the day and I'm the only person at the creek when I arrive. So I'm just getting in the water, I'm like ankle deep, and another car pulls up. And before I even looked, I could tell from the sound of the muffler that I wasn't gonna love the person behind the wheel of that car. And sure enough, I turn around to look, and the vehicle has a big old Confederate flag sticker on the back. And the guy who gets out, he's not pink like my neighbor Rick. He's red, like a chili pepper that gives you horrible diarrhea. So I avoid eye contact, obviously. I don't want to engage with a man who has a Confederate flag sticker on the back of his truck. So then the man starts walking into the water, and at this point, I'm already fully submerged halfway across the creek. And as he's getting in, I see something pop up in the water between us. A little dark head with tiny beady eyes. My first copperhead sighting. And this snake looked at me, and then he looked at him, and then he disappeared under the water again before I can even say anything. So I have a moment of panic because I have no idea where this snake is going. And it happened so fast, the next thing I hear is the red man screaming that he got bit by a copperhead. He ended up being okay, and I'm not saying that anyone deserves to get bit by a poisonous snake.
Okay, so story time about how my best friend ruined my birthday. So a little background information. I was 11, about to turn 12, and I was in 6th grade. By the way, I thought this was the funniest thing. The person who sent this story time in, she was like, oh, like, please change the names because the girl in this story time actually watches your videos. Okay, sis, like, anyways. So I had this one friend, and we are going to call her Amber. Amber and I had a very off and on friendship because let me tell you about Amber. Amber was the girl who thought that she was very, very popular. Now, I mean, she kind of was, but only because she had manipulated everybody into liking her. And she pretty much had everybody wrapped around her little slimy fingers. Well, also, her father owned a construction company where we lived, so she was very, very wealthy. Like, this is the type of girl who could buy her way out of any problem and buy all of her friends. But she was also the girl that you wanted at your birthday party, because since her family was very wealthy and she didn't have any siblings, so she was an only child, if she came to your birthday party, you knew that you were getting some extravagant, expensive shit. Well, there was this one boy that I really, really, really liked, and still do to this day. He was the same age, and he was in the same grade as Amber and I, and we are going to call him Colin. Well, no one knew that I liked Colin except for Amber, which, to be honest, I really don't even know why I told her, because I should have known that it was going to backfire in my face. Anyways, so Colin and I's family were very, very religious. Like, I mean extremely religious. So even though we liked each other, we could not date. But then again, it sounds reasonable. Like, we were in 6th grade. Nobody should have been dating anybody in 6th grade. It's just not right. Well, in addition to that, our parents were also super strict. Probably because they were religious, to be honest, if that makes any sense. Alright, so let's fast forward to my sophomore year. So surprisingly, Amber and I were actually doing pretty good, considering, like I said before, her and I were off and on literally 24/7. Like, literally, her and I being friends was just never a good thing, and I wish I would have saw it before, but I guess I was blind to red flags, even though she literally put me through 4 years of humiliation. But let's not get into that. Anyways, at the time I was 15, about to turn 16, and I was throwing a birthday party, like most would do. And of course I decided to invite her because at the time she was my best friend. Well, since our friendship had been going so well, I didn't think that anything bad would come of this. Well, the one day when we were in school, she asked me who all was going to be at the party. And as I was listing off names, I tried to nonchalantly mention that Colin was gonna be there. And right after I said that, she had this very evil look in her eye. Yeah, just super evil. Anyways, after that I really just should have disinvited her from the party, but I was blind to red flags. That's what I'm getting from this right now. I was blind. Well, in an instant, her mood went back to normal and she was like, OMG, I'm so happy for you. Like, this is gonna be so amazing. Hopefully now you and Colin will have a chance to get together. She was like, I know that you've liked him for a super long time. So now I'm just like, oh, you know, like things are gonna go good. You know, she doesn't care as much as I thought she would. You know, she's happy for me. Who's gonna tell her? Who is going to tell her? Anyways, yeah, she just kept going on about how she was so happy for me and everything. Well, later that night, she had texted me and asked me what I wanted for my birthday. And I knew exactly what I wanted. I told her about this necklace that I had been looking at for a while.